Hey everyone, Michael here from The Maine Gardener, and today I just kind of wanted to talk to you about the different ways that I overwinter tender perennials. So I recently made a video going over the differences between annuals and perennials and what that means for you in your zone and your area. Where I live, there are certain things that can't take our winter, so if I want to have them come back year after year, I need to store them somewhere inside so that I can keep them, and that way they won't die with the freezing temperatures that we have outside. So today I kind of have an assortment in front of me about everything that I overwintered and things that I need to start working on coming up. But basically, I'm going to categorize Paperwhites, Ranuculus, and Anemones into the same category. When it comes to it, Anemones and Ranuculus, they grow on corms. They're not the prettiest looking thing, but these are a spring flowering crop. And what that means is in the summertime, when it starts to heat up, they die back. And the way that you can save these is you cut the top off, the growth out of the ground, and then you cut the roots off, and then what you're left with are the actual corm itself. You let these dry out, and then you can simply just put these into a paper bag, and then you keep them into a cool, dry place, and then you store them for the rest of the year. Some people are able to overwinter these outside in a hoop house. We aren't able to do that here, no matter if we were to have it heated or not. Negative 30 degrees in the wintertime is just too cold for those. So for these, I like to put them either in the fridge or I put them in a dark place that stays dry, and it's between 40 and 50 degrees. Paperwhites are the same thing, but Paperwhites are a bulb. A lot of people recognize these from the wintertime. They make great gifts because you can basically force them whenever you want to. As soon as the foliage starts to turn yellow, that means that the bulb has absorbed all the nutrients that it needs to be able to produce flowers and growth again the next time you plant them. So at that point, you can see I've cut the roots off, I cut the top off, there's actually new growth coming out of it. But just like the Ranuculus and just like the Anemones, I put those right into a paper bag and I close that up, and then I put those either in the fridge or downstairs in the basement as well. Seeds. I have a lot of seeds that I overwinter. Basically, if a flower goes to flower, I let it dry out and then I end up cutting it off outside, trying to avoid any water. And then what you do is you let that sit for a week or two before you kind of crush it up, and then you save the little seeds from that. Something that I have learned is once I get a packet of seeds from either Johnny Seeds or Floret, wherever I get my seeds from, I save the packet. And then if I collect seeds from that plant, I put it back into the same packet, because on the back, they have all the information on how to grow that again. So I don't have to worry too much about, okay, do I need to plant these early in the springtime, late? Do I have to put them a fourth of an inch down into the soil or not? So again, these need to be kept in a cool, dry place. There's a trend here. Everything wants to stay cool. Everything wants to stay dry. You don't want these to get wet. If they get wet, they can mold, they can rot, and then they're no good. Something else that is pretty easy are Gladiolas. Gladiolas grow on a bulb as well. And after you have a frost, you'll start to notice that the tops will die back in the fall time. All I did, you can see about an inch above the bulb, I cut the top off, and then you cut the root system off. And I keep those stored in a breathable, these are tulip bags. So these are what all my tulips come in. And I kept them, there's a little bit of soil still in the root system. That's totally fine. And same thing, I put these in a cardboard box, and we have a cold storage area in our basement, and it stays between 45 and 50 degrees. It's not heated like the rest of the basement. So it's perfect for all of these to overwinter in. The last two things that I have here are Dahlias and Canna Lilies. So when it comes to Dahlias, these are some of the most beautiful flowers, but they grow from some of the ugliest looking tubers. These are tubers, and these are grown off of rhizomes. So when it comes to Dahlias, both of these two plants, when we get a first frost, the foliage dies back and turns completely black, and it turns to mush, and they basically start to disintegrate. That's a good time to indicate that, okay, you let them sit for another week or so in the ground, and then you dig them up, wash them off, and you can divide them. I had the best luck ever wrapping mine in saran wrap, as you can see. So what you basically do is you take one tuber, wrap it in your saran wrap, and then you continue to wrap the saran wrap around so that no two tubers are touching. And what that basically does is if anything starts to rot, there's a protective layer between the rest of them so that they don't go bad. That is super important because if you have different varieties that you have in the same box together, you don't want them to kill each other out. As you can see too, they all grow, or different varieties produce different size tubers. This one here is called Salmon Runner. It produces quite the large tuber. And then I have something over here, and this is called Castle Drive, and it's a significantly smaller tuber. Different varieties make different size tubers, but they all like to be stored the same. So I store mine all in saran wrap. They check on them throughout the winter time. You need to make sure that they're still firm. And if they're still firm, they don't want to be too wet, but they don't want to dry out completely. If they start to dry out, they shrivel up. And then you can either open them up and take a spray bottle, mist water on them, but that's the general gist of keeping your tubers looking good over the winter time. The last thing that is probably the easiest for me to take care of are Canna Lilies. So this one cluster of Canna Lily came from this one rhizome that I grew last year. So each of the flower pots that I put these in, they exponentially grew. And so this little tiny rhizome was able to produce this huge cluster last year. And as you can see, we got our frost. It killed everything back to the point where they were black. And I left 2 to 3 inches on top of growth that I had cut everything down to. I left soil around the root ball. Again, same with the rest of everything else. I put them in a cardboard box with newspaper, and I just watched them throughout the wintertime to make sure that none of them turn to mush. And if they do, you just throw that one out and you keep the rest happy. But what's nice about this, and this is a perfect example, one of these would go for $5 in the store, one little rhizome cluster. And by saving all of mine from last year, what you see in this bucket here is the same size rhizome cluster that I have divided up, and I have 18 different plants that I'll be able to plant this spring. So if you do the math on that, it really benefits you to save your stuff over the winter time instead of having to buy it fresh each year, because now I can share these with friends, I can plant them in different parts of the garden and not have to worry so much about cost. So thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it. These are kind of the ways that I store everything. It's going to be different depending on location and what you have available for cold storage areas. Stay tuned for more, and like and subscribe if you want to kind of see how I plant each of these when the time is right. The next video that I'll be able to make is going to be how to plant my Ranuculus and my Anemones. So if you subscribe, you'll get to follow along and see how that process works. Thank you guys.